Hey folks, Denise Howell here, and up next on This Week in Law, we've got Laura Slezinger and JD Lasica in studio. We've got Evan Brown in Chicago. We're going to talk about Siri and whether she's all that sexist or not. We're going to talk about the RIAA file-sharing suits and whether they were all that successful. ReDigi is an interesting new company that looks like it might be coming under legal scrutiny as it tries to help you resell your legally purchased downloaded music. Lots more to you up next on This Week in Law.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiL.
Bandwidth for This Week in Law is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is TWiL, This Week in Law with Denise Howell, episode 142, recorded for December 23rd, 2011. Siri, behave. This episode of This Week in Law is brought to you by Ford, featuring voice-activated sync app link. Now you can control select smartphone apps with your voice so you keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. Check it out in the 2012 Ford Fiesta and at ford.com/technology. And by Netflix. Watch thousands of TV episodes and movies on your PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or TV instantly. All streamed directly to you, saving you time, money, and hassle. For your free 30-day trial, go to netflix.com/twit. Hi, folks. It's Denise Howell here, and you've tuned in for This Week in Law, where we talk about law and technology and all the considerations involved therewith. Joining us today, we have a wonderful panel of folks to get into all those issues. We've got Evan Brown in Chicago. Hi, Evan.
Well, hello. Happy holidays. Great to see you.
Happy holidays to you. Wonderful to have you back on the show. And we have two in-studio guests joining us today. JD Lasica, my old friend and former TWiL panelist. Hello, JD.
How you doing, Denise? Happy holidays, everybody out there.
Happy holidays to you, too. And a newcomer to our TWiL panel, we've got Laura Slezinger from Girls in Tech. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Denise. Great to be here.
Great to have you on the show. And since we've got a couple of females on the panel today, and we haven't talked about all the controversy about Siri, I thought we might lead off with that. I haven't gotten the pleasure of making friends with Siri yet. I have not yet upgraded my iPhone, and I'm told by AT&T that I won't be able to do so at a discount for a really, 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 really long time. So I'm not sure how close Siri and I will be, but I guess people who have gotten close with her and or of the female persuasion have not been very impressed. That Siri seems to have been designed by young males for young males based on some of the answers that she's giving to questions like, where can I find an abortion clinic kind of thing? Where can I find opportunities for casual encounters? A little less heavy. Whereas the male responses, or the responses for male listeners are rather fruitful. For female users of Siri, the options are much more restrained. And I guess my reaction to this is, number one, I'm not surprised. Number two, my question, and I'll toss this out at JD, should we really expect our tech devices to be all things to all people? Is this kind of a tempest in a teacup about Siri?
It's not just a tempest, because I think it's an important issue that needs to be addressed. I remember about a year and a half ago, I was in, on the upper coast of California with Tom Gruber, one of the co-founders of Siri, and the call actually came into him while I was standing right next to him that, guess what, your company's just been bought by Apple. So he was like jumping up and down, clicking his heels. And the question is, after that happened, what kind of development took place? Apple is a big global company. They've got tons of resources. Surely they've got programmers on the staff that should have been doing all this kind of vetting before this was released as a major this is like the centerpiece of the new iPhone, right? I mean, that's all you see on these commercials, all about Siri. And now it's kind of funny then if you're a male, if you're a guy, if you say, Siri, I'm horny, what do you get? You get like, a half a dozen nearby escort services. And yet, if you're a woman and you have some sort of needs around, reproductive rights, it doesn't seem to address those. So, these are problems that need to be fixed. And instead of trying to wish the issue away or using some sort of PR campaign to have that happen, they ought to be spending night after night programming to make this work.
The reason I bring it up on This Week in Law is just to confront and dispel the notion that companies necessarily have to be all things to all people and the products that they put out there in the market. We're not talking about somebody's employer here. We're not talking about a government or government-funded institution. We're talking about a private company that gets to make market choices about what features are going to be present in their devices and how they work. And the market will then decide whether those features are what it wants to see. Evan, is there any further gloss you want to add to that from the legal standpoint?
Well, only future looking when it comes to this. I mean, I am not going to touch the touchy issues on this with the 10-foot pole. That go to the heart of the sexism and the reproductive rights issues and all of that stuff. I mean, I know better than that. But what I will say is that this, in my mind, seems like a harbinger of a number of issues that we're going to encounter in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, as we continue to think about how law and how norms should apply to technological advancement. And it's really interesting because when we're talking about Siri, we have kind of a divided mind. On one hand, we know that Siri really is just an agency of the programmers who made her. But at that moment when we choose to refer to her as a her, we're almost giving her an agency of her own, as if she is somehow legally responsible, maybe not even legally responsible, but just somehow responsible in a certain sense for her predilections, the decisions that she makes, the information that she has. So that's a really interesting phenomenon that I see in the discourse that we're having about this. And when I say that it's a harbinger, what I mean is that we're going to have so many more instances where we see artificial intelligence wending its way into our everyday lives and making our lives, giving us more choices and providing us with more assistance. And to the extent it becomes closer to our hearts and to our everyday activities, the responsibilities of those artificially intelligent agents are going to increase. And so the real question is, how are we going to handle this divided mind that we have? Is it going to shift? Because we all know now that really it's Apple who's ultimately responsible for this. We're not going to look at Siri as having her own consciousness and own agency and the ability to really make these decisions. We're looking at Apple. But as these become smarter and as they become more into our lives and take on a greater responsibility to us, are we going to start shifting that analysis to where we'll try to assign liability and responsibility more to the intelligent agent itself rather than the one who created it? So when I think about the legal questions involved with this, I'm not so much interested in what's going on right now, but how this is just an indicator of the things that we'll have to think about in the next few years. That's what I like thinking about.
Right. I'm so glad that you put it in that context, because it won't be long before we have technologies like this operating in an employment context and in a context where the federal government is involved and is held to the standard of having various things that it cannot do from a discrimination standpoint. Laura, the line from Amanda Marcotte's article over at Kashmir Hill's site on Forbes is what really caught my eye here. She wrote about this issue and her various specific experiences with Siri, and I encourage people to go read that. It's an excellent piece. It's called Siri is Sexist. And she's not, really so much blaming Apple or the programmers, but she comes to this conclusion that it is a telltale sign of a sexism that's so interwoven into the fabric of our society that it's nearly invisible. It's not really something that these people set out to do or that they're out to get somebody. It's just a question, the way that people think about things, it's not even there at the threshold. Do you agree with her?
I do agree that there's a lot of sexism and bias that is built into our society to the extent that, the average nice guy doesn't even notice. A lot of us don't notice. And I do see a lot of the female bloggers have responded in a similar way, saying, Siri is sexist, something along those lines. I did read an interesting article where a guy, but he unpacks how Siri actually works in looking at the connections it makes between how it answers questions, how it responds to certain words, how it connects certain words with other words. So one of the things everyone's up in arms about is the fact that you can search for Viagra and it gives you this long list of local drugstores. He did do a test where he tried to find acetaminophen, and Siri didn't really recognize that, but he could find Tylenol, and it also directed him to drugstores. So I'm really looking at it from this is not as nefarious as it looks. It's certainly built on the Apple programmers being skewed towards men and men's needs, but I don't think it was intentional in any way. And I don't want to be one of the women jumping on the bandwagon that it's certainly a concern we need to address, but I don't want to assign blame at this juncture. It is still a product being tested out.
JD, do you think this is a sign of product makers, the developer you mentioned, who was so excited when Apple came along and purchased them, of them having to view the world through politically correct lenses in a way that they haven't before? And I could see where that wouldn't be the best thing for product development.
Well, I don't think it's about political correctness. It's about creating a product that is in touch with all facets of the culture, right? Mm-hmm. I hate discussions where it sort of devolves into, well, it's a private company, so Apple has the right to be sexist or to be clueless or whatever it is, because that's beside the point. I think Evan is exactly right in the sense that these intelligent agents, artificial intelligence is going to permeate this culture and society, at least in the U.S. and Europe, Western democracies, in the next 5 to 10 years. So we have to hold these companies' feet to the fire to make sure that when they release these kinds of products, these services, that it's in tune with the sensibilities of a wider audience. These products, these programs are programmed by, male programmers overwhelmingly. If you go to, here I live in the northern tip of Silicon Valley, and, it's just the way it is here. When you go to these conferences, it's like 95% male, at least on stage, so you've got to sort of factor that in and sort of go against that and hire extra, whether it takes hiring extra women programmers to, sort of educate the boys about what needs to be included in these products, or taking some other steps about bringing in some outside groups to sort of take a look at these kinds of things to make sure that they passed the smell test.
It occurs to me as we talk through this that as databases get more and more crowdsourced, these problems will diminish. So if Siri were not just the function of, whatever the programmers had thrown in there as a good idea, but we're drawing from a pool of data that was contributed to by people from all genders and cultures and walks of life, then you'd get the right answers to each individual's questions ultimately. So maybe, Evan, that's where we need to see developers taking their AI solutions, not just dealing with a limited set of information and perspectives.
That's a great point, and actually that does underscore one of the issues that pertain to this, and that Siri, from a purist standpoint, truly is not artificially intelligent, because it's my understanding she doesn't actually learn as she goes along. She's only capable of returning information from a predefined data set that the user doesn't have the ability to affect. And I'm sure if I am wrong on that, the IRC will promptly correct me on that. Assuming that is true, then some of the issues as to how much we should assign responsibility to the programmers would diminish, because if the agent truly is intelligent and is learning based on what it experiences, taking the knowledge that it gets and integrating that, learning the preferences of the user, for example, it's not inconceivable that the user could somehow, and I'm using the term kind of loosely here, could somehow train Siri to become extremely sexist or extremely the opposite of that. I guess what would be the term, progressive or whatever the opposite of the undesirable characteristic is. And that still, to me, presents the question of where is it that we are going to assign responsibility, whether that responsibility take the form of legal liability or just some kind of moral responsibility or normative responsibility, when there are actually really smart agents that are coming in and affecting us in a very material type of way. That's, to me, the fascinating inquiry to be made here.
Denise, the other interesting thing that's going to be worth watching is how this is used in a commercial context, right? So it's not, really it's not the programmers, by the way. It's the product managers that are responsible for this, and ultimately, the CEO of the company.
Sure.
But are they going to be going to be trying to sneak in some advantage for their own products? When you're at a corner in San Francisco asking for a computer store, will they direct you to the Apple store but not to the Microsoft store, or the Sony store down the street? So I think, it's up to us as individuals to sort of be watchdogs a little bit as these things roll out, to make sure that there's these norms that are met, sort of expectations that we set. And yeah, we can go off and boycott them or go to another product. But I think some of these products from like Apple, they're so ubiquitous, it's part of our culture now, that they have to be held to a higher standard in some sense. And by the way, my 12-year-old was talking about this last night because he's on collegehumor.com. He's like 12 years old, and he's on College Humor like every single night. And there's an amazing Siri send-up. If you haven't seen the parody, it's like 60, 90 seconds long, and by the end of it, the commercial, Siri is swearing at them, couples breaking up, by the time the whole thing is over. So it's just hilarious. Check it out. We should put it on the site later, right?
Yes, I'll stick it in the show notes for sure. Laura, do you have any sort of final words on this from the girls in tech perspective?
More women need to become programmers and product managers. That's it.
Mm-hmm. That's it. And how do we get there? That seems to be the open question.
It starts young. I think that parents, teachers, and the community need to encourage girls at a very young age to pursue the sciences and technical studies. I know that there are tons of tech companies in this area that are actively recruiting women with technical backgrounds, but there are just very few out there. So I get that on a weekly basis where they're looking, but there's just not that many women filling the positions. So we need to teach our girls to keep on it.
Yeah, we're still in a world where I see the kindergarten girls at the local elementary school sort of automatically funneled into the after-school cheerleading activities as opposed to the after-school science activities. And I know that varies from parent to parent and family to family, but, just what you can see with your eyes says that we're not where we could be on all this stuff. So folks need to keep it in mind. JD, you were talking about veering people to your own product. How about this Amazon Price Check app, where you could, this was released shortly after the whole Black Friday, Cyber Monday extravaganza. This apparently is a tool that Amazon has where you can go into a retailer, take out your iPhone or Android device, scan the barcode of something you're looking at in the real world, that automatically gets added to your Amazon basket. And if you buy it that way, you get 5% off. So they're actively stealing the sale from the brick and mortar retailers, as though they weren't doing that already, in enough different ways. How does this strike you? Is this war just over and Amazon's just driving the point home, or have they crossed a line here?
I don't know that they've crossed a line. I mean, they're doing it, they're a business. They're in the business of making money, and I don't think there's any nefarious about people doing comparison price shopping. I'd be surprised if, millions of people started shopping that way. I mean, it certainly seems like a little bit of a waste of time to actually be in a store, take out your app, do that kind of scanning, and then, get a 10% price break. If you're that hard up for saving money, maybe it's a customer service that they're doing.
Okay, I guess I'm that hard up. I gotta, tell you my little anecdote that I didn't even know this app existed. It probably didn't exist when I did this, but it was right around the Thanksgiving holiday. And I hate to say it because we were at a zoo that I love and support. We're members there. I give them money, and we were in their little gift shop. And there were a couple of things I saw in there that would have made great Christmas presents, but the prices were high. And so, what I did was just jot down the titles or figure out how I would be able to later search for the thing. And then I walked out of the store. I didn't do it right there in the store. And I bought them on Amazon, even without an additional 5% discount, because the savings were enough to warrant that act for me.
Well, did you not feel a little guilty? I mean, at some point we have to sort of take ownership over the fact that we're driving brick and mortar stores out of existence by going for the absolute lowest price. So there are other valuable things that these stores bring to neighborhoods. Coffee shops and people getting together. In meet space, face to face. And if the only factor that's important to you is price, God bless you. Fine, do that. But I think there are other kinds of considerations that we as citizens need to think about when we're, actually there's in the act of shopping is a social act. So, do we transfer that entire experience to the online experience? I don't know. I think you have to sort of make a balancing act, have a balancing test of some sort there.
Right,
yes.
Denise, and I imagine that the animal activists will be after you now because you're turning down that sale from the zoo. I mean, don't you care about the monkeys and stuff?
No, I'm assuaging my guilt because I actually do pay them a good chunk of money each year to be a member there. But I think I know what you're saying, JD, but I think that's a lot to ask of consumers. And I'm wondering, Evan, if you think that that Amazon might face some kind of legal, if not action, some kind of legal response to this. Like, I'm wondering if competitive brick and mortar stores might try and put up roadblocks to this, either, in some kind of contractual way. You may only use our store if you check your cell phone and app-enabled device at the door. And, if you can think of any other response they might make from the legal standpoint.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a good one. And to be honest, I hadn't even thought of that until you mentioned it right then. Might the store somehow try to restrict the condition of accessing the store? But when it comes down to actually implementing that, I don't know how it would be reasonably enforceable. Are they going to have clerks kicking people out because they have their phone out? That seems pretty draconian and would backfire very quickly. So that makes me think this may be something better for, like a hypothetical on a law school exam than what would actually happen in the literal marketplace here. What I see as the most fruitful discussion for a legal issue arising from all of this is on the privacy side. It's my understanding that Amazon requires, or that the settings for the device have to be set to transmit your location to Amazon when you're doing this. So the Amazon is getting really granular data pertaining to both time and space as to what you're shopping for, where you're at, when you're doing it. and it's able to gather all that. And I mean, just as soon as I say that, I'm kind of saying the same thing as what I said about the other one. I don't know that a legal claim would be all that viable because users should know, right, that they're transmitting that information. But to me, that's where the most interesting discussion, and really, in to the same extent, where the brilliance on Amazon's part is in providing this incentive, this inducement for people to do that in return for what I see as just extremely valuable commercial information about what people want and how much they're willing to pay for it and where they're looking for it. Can make it really effective for them to be marketed to this time next year, for example, when they're shopping for holiday gifts.
Right. Laura, if you're a brick and mortar store, do you fight back against this, or is that just opening a
I
can
haven't
of
done
worms?
nearly enough shopping lately, but I would say that there's already brick and mortar stores that do this. It's not as nifty in the sense that you're not scanning a barcode, but plenty of brick and mortar stores already offer to undercut competitors' prices if you bring in evidence of that pricing. So there's kind of a precedent.
Yeah, that sort of has a built-in drag to it, I guess, because, you know, you've got to be walking around and taking things from store to store in order to take advantage of that kind of a deal, where this is fairly frictionless. So I don't know, JD, do you really, when you're shopping, do you consider all the social ramifications over price every time?
There's an app on my iPhone called The Good Guide. Have you heard of that? So it's not about price. It's about scanning barcode products to make sure that this product was not manufactured under slave labor conditions, or it's environmentally friendly, or, you know, sometimes it'll suggest alternatives that are on the same shelf, like a few shelves over. So, you know, number one, it's not going to be possible for people to sort of ban iPhones or mobile smartphones from store aisles, because it's just not going to happen. Aside from the legal issues, you know, they've become a part of our lives. And so it's not all about price cutting, it's also about getting more information. So the more that we're sort of empowered, and we have the more knowledge, more information that's at our hand at a glance, you know, I think the smarter choices we're going to be making, whether it's supporting certain kinds of companies with certain kinds of products and services, or getting the best bargain, you know, for the buck.
That's great, JD. I'm definitely going to download that and levy my shopping tendencies with a little bit of social conscience as well.
Gosh, but you've got to make sure that the programmers who set up the decision-making algorithms, you know, had their minds together and they weren't too sexist or whatever. Maybe they, you know, all I'm saying is, don't you see some similarities in the potential for bias or prejudice and something like that as something that you would see in Siri, another good example.
Oh, absolutely. Every single one of these products is going to be coming through a particular kind of prism or lens, right? So this is being put out by some kind of progressive organization with a database of over 80,000 products that have been reviewed by these progressive reform kind of groups. There are other kinds of, probably somebody from the other side of the political spectrum can make an equally valid app that appeals to their own political agenda. So, you know, the more the merrier, I think.
Let me know if you see it, because I've got some friends, you know, who like hate the environment. They want all the little kids around the world to be starting work at age 3. No, put them to work at age 2. They can run messages.
Sounds like Newt.
That's right. So send that my way. I want to download that one. I'll pay 99 cents for that one. I'm kidding.
Okay.
Come on. Like,
Of course. We're going to just call you Scrooge during our holiday season here, Evan.
That's it. It's
All
called
right.
Tiny Tim.
No, I would never do that to you. All right. Well, we're here with Evan Brown and JD Lasica and Laura Slezinger talking about all kinds of good stuff. JD, if you guys don't know, has written one of my favorite books on copyright and file sharing issues called Darknet. Wonderful, wonderful read. So I want to get into some copyright issues in a minute. But before we go there, I want to thank our first sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law, which is Ford with AppLink. Ford Sync with AppLink enables you to control select applications from your smartphone with simple voice commands while you keep your hands on the wheel and your eyes on the road. So when you're out there price comparing, or when you're out there hoping to ensure the social integrity of the products that you are interested in purchasing, Ford with Sync AppLink can actually help you out, because you can do things like voice control Pandora in your car. You can listen to tweets with OpenBeak just by asking with a simple voice command. Once your smartphone is linked to an app that works with this, for example, you can use voice commands, say you're using Pandora, to select your favorite station or make a new one. You can bookmark songs to purchase. You can give songs a thumbs up or thumbs down. And you can ask it to play stations like your classic rock station. You can bookmark songs. And with OpenBeak, you can simply say, read timelines or read replies, and it'll read you that part of your Twitter stream. Sync with AppLink is built on an API platform that allows Ford to continue to work with developers in the app community to bring apps to life with voice in their vehicles. Voice-activated Sync AppLink is available in the 2012 Ford Fiesta. You can learn much more about this and other technologies Ford is working on for its vehicles at ford.com/technology. Thank you so much, Ford, for your support of This Week in Law. All right, JD, so apparently after all of the file sharing suits have come and mostly gone, and the RIAA has mostly abandoned the strategy, we have one of their spokespeople going on record and saying how successful these suits were, what wonderful goals they accomplished for the RIAA. This is Liz Kennedy, their communications director, who's sticking up for that strategy. Did you get a chance to take a look at this, and what do you think of Ms. Kennedy's comments?
Yeah, I saw that. That was really interesting. I mean, I think the RIAA declaring victory or taking credit for the file sharing wars is like Hosni Mubarak, taking credit for the popular uprising in Egypt. I mean, they were both there, but these huge sweeping changes that are taking place across the landscape, certainly in the music industry, were taking place, despite, not because of what the RIAA has done over the years. I can't imagine. Well, I can't remember, actually, the last time, I guess the last innovation that sort of came out of the music industry was the CD, like 25, 30 years ago, right? I mean, since then, everything that has happened to sort of propel the music industry, the record labels forward into the digital age has come while they've been kicking and screaming the entire way. This is how, we live today, right? I mean, the kids today, those kids out there, well, they want their music in digital form. I was part of the Traveling Geeks trip to London and Cambridge 3 years ago, and I met the CEO of Spotify. I think, what did they come out of, Sweden or something? Mm-hmm. At that time, 3 years ago, they said, in a couple of months we'll be in the U.S. It took them like 2.5 years to get here because of all the resistance from the music labels. And now, so now they've got millions and millions of users. It's not the perfect answer, but it's the closest thing we have to a universal jukebox. Now we just have to figure out the second half of the equation, which is how to get the artists decent compensation for their creations.
And I would say the third half, I know there's no third half, the third part of the equation too is I'm not real wild about Spotify's UI and just, what you can do with it. I guess for the limited purpose of going and finding a particular song or a particular artist, it's great, but I've gotten spoiled by services that suggest a whole lot of discovery avenues, and I'm not seeing the potential of that in Spotify.
I didn't see that at first until I started using the social network aspect of it. So, when you're in Spotify, for those who haven't used it, off to the right side of your pane, you'll see your entire social network if you've sucked them into Spotify, right? So you can click through on each person, see what kind of, whether they've got awful taste or not. But more often than not, you'll find some interesting kinds of playlists that people create. And there's like an entire aspect of serendipity that I didn't see in Pandora that I see here. So it's not recommendations based on algorithms; it's recommendations based on similarities of musical tastes of artists that you like. So it's kind of an interesting kind of model.
Right. So getting back to this RIAA spokeswoman, Evan, she says that it was actually, a positive campaign, and they're glad they did it because they never expected to end piracy. The goal was to bring the problem under sufficient control so that lawful businesses could compete and the industry could earn enough to protect jobs and invest in new bands. Do you think that they actually pulled that off?
No, of course not. But what do you expect them to say at this point? This is nothing more than a spin campaign, or an effort to put a spin on something that was disastrous from a public relations standpoint. And I guess I don't mean to be so unequivocal in my answering. Did they accomplish X? From a certain standpoint, this is such a complicated issue, both legally, economically, socially, that there's no way of meaningfully evaluating, what on earth happened in the last 10 years when it came to all this stuff. Not to mention the fact that, generational perspectives were changing, musical innovation in and of itself was changing. So, the point I'm making and belaboring now is that there's no way of really objectively evaluating all this stuff. So when there are statements that come out like this, my suggestion would be that we've got to take these with the most minute grain of salt that one's perception will permit them to take with this, and realize that this is nothing more than posturing. Nothing in any of this stuff I see is actually capable of changing one's convictions about these things from the first instance. If you didn't think these massive lawsuits against or against individuals by the RIAA was a good idea in 2003, you're not likely to think it was a good idea now, having read a piece like this. Taking the perspective of the RIAA post-mortem and all this stuff.
Laura, JD was talking about how innovations in the music industry have been coming primarily from the technology arena. And I found over on your Girls in Tech site an article about a really interesting company I hadn't heard of before called ReDigi, that is creating the world's first online marketplace for used pre-owned digital music, which we've talked about a lot on the show before. What are people's rights in their downloaded pre-owned digital music? So I think this is a really fascinating site. Have you looked at it very closely? I see Adriana I'm going to butcher her name. Gascoigne. There we go. Her article was dated back in October. First of all, are these people still in business? Do you know?
They seem to be still in business because the RIAA served them with a cease and desist demand letter a couple of weeks ago. So, unless something's happened in the last couple of weeks, but they have a very interesting, it sounds like a whole can of worms, but they have a very interesting business model where they're going for, they're trying to use the first sale doctrine. They're creating a second market for our air quote used digital music files, and basically have some mechanism by which they assert that they can actually pull the file from your computer, completely erase any copies, any and all copies, any future copies, and they transfer it allegedly without actually making a copy, which of course with the first sale doctrine has been the big stumbling block. So whether that can actually that's what actually happens or not, I don't know that anybody has verified. They haven't opened up their the technology to be inspected as yet. But the CEO seems very confident that he's clear with the law. He apparently has consulted a lot of large law firms in the area, and he seems to think it's going to work.
Right. So what we've chewed on and thrown out as a thought problem before is, of course, the companies that you're downloading music from legally lock everything down, and ownership is a moving target in the world of digital legally purchased music. That what you're really purchasing is the right to listen to the music, move it around to a few devices. But when you get into being able to resell it, that's something they claim to be able to regulate in their terms of service. Evan, do you think that ReDigi has a chance to bulldoze past that barrier?
I don't know. Honestly, I haven't looked at it as closely as what I should have, but it seems like it needs to hinge on what you're identifying here, this question of ownership, with which, if you're going to take a strict position on it as what the content industry would, it's not an ownership question at all. It's a question of sub-licensing something. And so to me, the starting and end point for the analysis seems to be is whether or not this is a sub-licensable right. And, I confess I haven't looked at the, precisely what the arrangement between ReDigi users is, and how that relates to the terms of service. But that's where I would go to try to find answers. I'm intrigued, and if people say that they have found a good faith argument for it, then I'll take the time to listen to them. But I just haven't done that yet.
Yeah, JD, it seems like we need an update to your book. It's been a few years since Darknet. We need to have you
Things
revisit.
are moving pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a really interesting issue, because I think, I'm not a lawyer, right? So I can't speak from a legal point of view, but I think from the cultural point of view, for most people out there on the street, down here in beautiful downtown Petaluma, if you ask them, when you download a song from Amazon Music or from iTunes, and you paid for it, they think they've owned it and that they have the right to do with what they wish. Nobody reads those 50-page, disclaimers on the website, that iTunes puts in. I think like every single week when I go back on iTunes, there's like an update to the stupid terms of use. Nobody reads that, and so there's like this disconnect between what the law actually is and what people assume about the products, the services that they buy. So, in the old days, I remember when you bought a record or a CD, you owned it. You could do what you want with it. You could give it to your friends. You can make copies. Today, it seems like they're still trying to clamp down and restrict, the uses that you can make of digital music, even after you no longer even want to use it anymore. So why shouldn't we be able to, resell it or give it to our friends, or, the whole world is moving to digital. So does that mean we're going to have to give up those rights that we've enjoyed for, decades?
Well, we'll watch this one. If they've hit the RIAA's radar, maybe those precise issues will get litigated out. So thanks, Laura, for coming on the show and getting Adriana's article in front of us. I would never have heard of this company. I'm sure, once they were in litigation, they would have come more to the public view. We've got lots more to talk about with JD and Laura and Evan in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to thank our second sponsor for this episode of This Week in Law, and that's Netflix, which, as you know, hopefully you know right now, if you haven't, been living under a rock somewhere, that Netflix streams thousands of TV episodes and movies directly to you instantly, which saves you time, money, and hassle. There are several easy ways to instantly access streaming movies and TV shows with Netflix. You can watch on your TV or on your Mac or PC or iPad. You can watch on your phone. If you're looking for different ways to watch on your TV, there are about, probably 24 options out there. Every gaming console you can think of supports Netflix these days. If you're not a gamer, you can use an Apple TV or a Roku to bring it right into your living room. Those are inexpensive and easy to use. With Netflix, you can watch movies and TV shows instantly using any of those kinds of tools, and you can begin watching a movie or show on one device and finish it on a different one. Whichever way you choose to access Netflix, you can watch as many movies and TV shows as you want, anytime you want. during the holidays. I cannot tell you how invaluable our Netflix service has been. It's been running pretty much nonstop in our house, for as long as I'll let the TV stay on. And rather than watching the latest episode of SpongeBob, which of course you can access, ad nauseum on Netflix as well, they're great. Their great holiday section has been much in use in our household, and it's really fun to go back and see both old favorites there and things you've never heard of before that they have cataloged and will deliver instantly to your home. You can cancel this at any time. If you haven't tried it, go right now over to netflix.com/twit. Be sure to use that URL when you sign up. And we thank Netflix for their support of This Week in Law. We hope you enjoy watching instantly with Netflix. All right. So we have talked a lot about SOPA. Now there's the new proposal, the open legislation, which is shaping up as a kinder, gentler version of enforcement legislation, IP protection legislation that may be the middle ground through the warring camps who, either think we need SOPA and protect IP right now, or that they're the worst thing that could ever happen to the internet. One thing that's worth noting here in the holiday season is that on Cyber Monday, the ICE folks didn't have any problem at all shutting down 150 websites all on their own without any additional much debated legislation. So maybe we don't need any of this. What do you think, JD?
Well, if you remember way back in 1998, the two warring parties, the entertainment industry, and everybody else at the table came up with the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA, that sort of nobody liked at the time, but it sort of struck a grand bargain, a grand compromise between these warring factions. And so to sort of relitigate that is sort of an odd kind of thing right now, because it doesn't seem like that is broken. It sort of set the ground rules in place. And, I don't know if you or Evan would agree with this, but I kind of think it almost paved the way for the social media revolution. I mean, I don't think you would see these sites where millions of people could freely share content, much of it their own, sometimes bits and pieces borrowed from the culture, if they were constantly worried about, being hit with copyright infringement lawsuits. So I don't know what this grand compromise is today. I'm a little bit concerned because some of the players at the table, you still have the MPAA, the RIAA, all the content industry, the entertainment industry, pushing for really kind of draconian kind of measures where you can shut down a site, you can block DNS addresses, the kinds of things that you see, in like draconian countries, governments from China and Iran. If any of this kind of stuff remains in the mix, it's really bad news. So, let's see what comes out of this, but I'm really disappointed. People like my Senator Dianne Feinstein, Patrick Leahy, who's a hero on so many other issues, are getting sucked into one side of this issue, the entertainment side, without taking into consideration not just the technology lobbies side, the fact that these innovative companies, the Googles of the world and Twitter and Facebook and all the rest would be threatened to a large degree by these kinds of measures, but they're not even, taking into consideration the general public. We ought to be moving in the opposite direction, in my opinion, of where we are today. We ought to be loosening copyright laws so that we can borrow from, I can't even remix a film from 1930 because it's still covered under copyright. So we ought to be lessening that in the internet age. Instead, it seems like we're still tightening the screws.
Evan, you've said before on the show that you're concerned that even the open legislation that's been proposed is building in too much government infrastructure, perhaps, in addition to what we already have. I'm not hearing a whole lot as these bills are debated about the fact that the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency seems to have no problem seizing domain names with the laws that are already on the books.
That's right, and that the fact that it is the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement Agency doing this work is the way that this type of enforcement is distinguishable than what is proposed under the Open Act. The Open Act actually takes it out of the government's hands from doing the enforcement or being, in the position of the plaintiff or the moving party in enforcement actions, and puts it in the hands of private parties, but the jurisdiction would be with the International Trade Commission. So it's kind of a mix of different things going on here, and no doubt it's preferable. The Open is preferable to SOPA and Protect IP in that it doesn't give that power to the Attorney General's office, and it doesn't. And Open does not contain those provisions that are so dangerous to the internet. Those rights to mess with DNS that would break the internet that opponents of SOPA and Protect IP have in them. So it certainly is an important consideration. And to what you initially brought up there, the concern that I have raised before about it putting too much, putting more power in the government. I guess the qualification I would want to make on that is that the means of enforcement, or the forum in which enforcement will take place, is so centralized, not only symbolically, but also logistically as well. This would all take place in Washington, D.C. And so I'm concerned by the centralization of the means for this type of enforcement, and that really is a separate issue from whether or not the remedies themselves are bad or too heavy or something like that. But you make a great point that sometimes we tend to forget that ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, are doing all this stuff. I trust that it's just a small fraction of even a percentage of all the sites that they actually could go after. I'm sure there are many for every infringing site that ICE takes down. I'm sure there are 100 that they could have gone after. It's just with the limited resources of the government, which is an argument in favor as to why it should be in the hands of the private industry to be in the position of the moving party when it comes to enforcement matters. This is not the government, except for the most egregious situations. It shouldn't be the government's business to be vouching for the rights of the RIAA.
Right, 150 sites is not that much in the grand scheme of things. Laura, Girls in Tech is focused a lot on incubating upcoming new companies. Are there concerns among the entrepreneurs that you deal with and talk to about all of this pending, possibly soon to be enacted legislation?
I haven't seen a lot of concern, but that might be partially because a lot of times the entrepreneurs don't so much worry about that stuff. They have their fantastic idea and they're running with it. And a lot of these things are an afterthought until they bring in an attorney who kind of, might slow them down a little bit, and they don't actually like to hear it. But I haven't been hearing a lot of concern from early stage entrepreneurs now. That might be a problem, but...
Yes, exactly. I think that, awareness and discussion about all this stuff is good, even with folks with their eyes on another prize. Since I have you two Bay Area folks there in the studio, I noticed there was a story about BART changing its cell phone policy. JD, can you remind folks what happened a few months ago, the brouhaha we had there with BART turning off cell service for people?
Well, there was a large protest in San Francisco, and the way to get to downtown San Francisco is with BART, the public transit line here. And at one point, as the protesters were massing, some guy, at a higher level of BART decided to switch off cell phone reception. So, it's a very enclosed area. So if you don't have that enabled by BART, you can't get through on your phones. So their claim was that they were doing it for public safety, to protect against people doing troublesome stuff, on the BART line. But there was a big a hue and cry about it. Yeah, a big backlash by the public about, I think the ACLU came in and made some threats that, if you try this again, we'll hit you with a free speech suit. So it's very troubling when these government agencies take these extra steps that sort of go beyond what they need to do to protect public safety and impinge on free speech.
So, Laura, now that they've changed their policy, do you think that they've managed to navigate these waters and, protect the safety of the system and folks riding on it, and still enable folks to be comfortable that they're going to be able to exercise their free speech rights in BART stations and BART areas?
Well, I have to say that my first reaction to that as the user of an iPhone on the AT&T network, I was really surprised to hear that you could get cell service in the BART stations to begin with. So it took me a while to get past that. I was like, what? So I felt I'd been missing out for a long time. But their new standard, I guess, that they're going to be using is shutdowns if there are extraordinary circumstances. I don't know how well they've fleshed out what extraordinary circumstances would qualify as. So certainly it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And there are definitely a lot of people that are going to be watching. There are plenty of protests and plenty of organizations chiming in.
Right. The First Amendment Center is one that has written up the new policy and says that BART is saying that they'll only interrupt service when there is strong evidence that cell phones may be used to set off explosives, substantially disrupt transit services, or can be tied directly to plans for violence or crime. So whatever strong evidence is remains, I guess, subject to interpretation, but it seems clear enough. What do you think, Evan?
Yeah, I mean, if we parse the language and it actually does what it's saying it's doing there, then I don't see how a reasonable person can argue with that. If somebody's going to set off a bomb somewhere and it relies on some type of cellular communications to do that, then clearly that is an unassailable public interest that needs to be met. And should not infringe upon a First Amendment right to send a tweet about it. So, if that truly is the way that it's being enacted, and it's articulated in a way that it's set to prevent only these most severe sorts of bad things happening, then I have no stone to throw at it.
Right, and just think, if the train system in the Caprica series had BART's policy in place, maybe we could have avoided the whole series altogether. There would have been no explosion that everything then could have flowed from. Okay, so I was a little disappointed with Caprica. I've gotten that off my chest.
You got 15 nerd cred points, I think.
Let's see. Twitter is going to make it tougher to access your old tweets. Twitter, it's never been terribly easy to access your old tweets on Twitter. And now I guess that the advanced search operators are going to be even more cracked down. So, the Library of Congress thing is supposed to archive tweets, but that's going to be difficult to access. They're not going to be publicly available. Does anybody care about this? If you're really interested in keeping track of your tweets, maybe you need to be doing something locally. The reason I bring it up here is because I think that people have this notion that they own this data and that Twitter doesn't, and that if they can't access it, they've been essentially deprived of the benefits of owning it. What do you think, JD?
I haven't read the Twitter terms of use lately. I'd be very surprised if the terms of use said, "Oh, you own anything you do on our network." I think. It sort of depends on why they're doing this. I'll have to go and check that out. I think there are a lot of data scraping companies out there that are trying to build businesses off of Twitter tweets. Data is, it's really coming into its own. It's becoming a business model all by itself. The kinds of information that we're tweeting about, whether it's our relationships, our friends, things that we've eaten for breakfast, or businesses that we interact with, or brands. that's there's a business there in terms of finding out what people really care about, what they're passionate about, what they're communicating about with other people about. And so when you can monetize that, it goes a long way. So if they're cutting off the flow so that only they have access to it and other people can't access it so that they can't interpret that data and make other kinds of uses for it, well, that cuts both ways. It might protect us from privacy abuses, but it might also prevent us from using that data for our own purposes.
Evan, where do you come down on this? Is it the responsibility of the service or the user?
Well, I would have to come down on the side of the user ultimately for his or her own tweets. I, for example, archive my tweets in a very low-tech way. Every few months I go and literally copy and paste the stream. Like I keep going to the bottom of the page so it loads more and more. And so I have a single plain text file that has all the tweets that I've put up since May of 2007 when I joined, because I don't rely on Twitter making those things available for me. But you see, that's of course missing the really important issue here, and the big point is the right and ability to actually make this stuff available in a useful way cannot be perfected by the individual user. That is the responsibility of Twitter itself and any other third parties who have been granted the rights to have a whole archive. What's most meaningful, I think, about Twitter is it as a whole, and showing the relationships and the communications that people have been made. Like, for example, if we wanted to go back and do a study on how the news of Michael Jackson's death spread virally on Twitter back in June of 2009. That's nothing that I could do from looking with what I really have the ability to access. So to the extent that the data set and this grand, huge data set is not being available, and moreover is not being available, lending itself to effective search, then that is a real disservice. And it's unfortunate, and I don't know what really should, if there's anything mandatory that should be made to be done about all this. But it's lamentable that it's not readily searchable. I'm so glad that you couched it in the way you did, JD, because it really is. It kind of brings to one's consciousness this notion of the right to forget, or the right to be forgotten. So if this stuff is out there and not searchable, it becomes obscure, which would be the technological equivalent of having been forgotten, and that has obvious implications on our personal privacy, to the detriment or at a sacrifice to the openness and the richness of the picture we could develop of ourselves as a society if it were easily searchable and easily fiddled with or something.
By the way, I wrote an article for Salon back in the 1990s called The Internet Never Forgets. It was my first interview with Brewster Kahle, the founder of the Internet Archives. So for those of you who don't know, you can go to archive.org and look at the Wayback Machine and all those really ugly web pages that you created back in the 1990s. Guess what? They're still there. It's scary.
Yeah, unless you've affirmatively blocked them from being there.
So you were talking about the internet never forgetting way back then, and you also weren't the last person to write a book called Darknet, right? Isn't there a Daniel Suarez book by the same name, but maybe confused with the title, right?
There are a bunch of things out there. I've moved on to a new life. I'm now a social media consultant for companies, including lawyers, who need to get more social. Denise and Evan, I think you're the exception to the rule.
Oh no, we're very antisocial. Pathological.
No friends.
Hey, Laura, how do you see this whole Twitter? It goes beyond Twitter, obviously. You look at Facebook and Google Plus and other places where people put their data, and I think you get into a situation where people might expect it to be available, but then it's not, or they might, on the other hand, Europe has talked much about the right to forget, and talked about enacting laws along those lines, that there should be an ability for some of this stuff to go away without you having to affirmatively do anything about that. Do you have any take on this?
I think that the right to forget might be something out of a bygone era. I think it's actually really fantastic that Library of Congress is collecting the tweets, and I believe it's all just every tweet ever, which will be fascinating to look at somewhere down the line. I mean, even the banal tweets where it kind of shows you what people are focusing on. I'm sure there's been a ton of Charlie Sheen tweets this year and all sorts of ridiculous stuff, but it does tell you a lot about what's going on in society, and I'm sure a lot can be applied, the same stuff can be applied to Facebook and a lot of these other social media networks. And as far as the access thing, I do believe that there's probably a number of startups out there working on aggregating all this stuff as we speak. So I'm sure that it'll come along any moment now.
All right. Thanks for that. Hey, GD, I don't know if you officially know this, but you are now my designated person to fill me in when there are events up in Northern California that I can't quite make it to that I'd love to go to, and I know you're going to be there. So you've recently gone to the Web 2.0 Summit and to TechCrunch Disrupt. Laura, I don't know if you went to either or both of those two. Please chime at both. So guys, fill me in. What's new? What do we need to know? What are the takeaways? You can start, JD.
I'll have to wear my helmet with my live streaming cam next time, so you don't miss a minute, right? Innovation keeps happening. There's a lot of really interesting stuff happening around the mobile space right now. So whenever I go to a Web 2.0 conference or where there's a Where conference right now, there are new startups coming out of the woodwork, and it's all around geolocation. And I think that's where the next kind of interesting, maybe the next episode of TWiL that I'll be on in a year will be about privacy violations, because people don't realize what's happening when they're taking their cell phones into certain kind of public spaces and have their their GPS settings set a certain way. It's really interesting to see how this is all evolving into new kind of business models around getting people to come out to restaurants or to find deals or to do other kinds of, actions around mobile technologies that intersect with commerce. So, it's hard to build businesses off of these, but these are the kinds of things that we're seeing, new kinds of innovations around mobile, I think, is a big thing right now.
Great. What do you think, Laura?
I'm usually there in my capacity as kind of an exhibitor or speaker for Girls in Tech. So a lot of times I'm kind of focused on that and not maybe soaking in as much of the talk that's going on. I think that Disrupt is a really fantastic and slightly different conference because the environment there is so casual and kind of, dorm room, common area-ish. Everyone's kind of lounging around and shenanigans ensue. So it's not as much of a formal conference in that way, but I didn't take in as many of the speakers because I was working, essentially.
Did it seem different? Didn't it happen in the wake of the whole Arrington brouhaha?
It was about a week after, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot of chatter.
A lot of chatter, but the conference was essentially the same?
That was my first year at TechCrunch, actually. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how it differed from past years.
What do you think, JD? Is it going to go by the wayside under the Ariana guidance?
I always thought Michael Arrington and AOL were probably going to last for maybe 6 months tops. So. Mm-hmm. AOL made that strategic decision when they bought TechCrunch that they were buying a brand. They weren't buying Michael Arrington, right? So, I think they do a good job with their tech coverage. The reporters are still focused. They miss Michael, but, they're moving on. And I think Michael comes on as a guest contributor on a regular basis. So everybody's happy there. As far as the conference, it really didn't change a whole lot. And I'll tell you, most of the action at a lot of these conferences, including TechCrunch Disrupt, really don't take place on stage. So, there are people in the auditorium all the time, but boy, most of the action really does take place in the startup alley. You can't help but just go down the row one by one and find some interesting new things that you've never heard of before. And, by the time the day is over, you've downloaded another 20 apps onto your phone and found some new people to connect with. So it's pretty cool.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll go to our tip of the week, which is actually a series of tips, again, from the Girls in Tech site and Andrea Gascoigne. Gascoigne?
Yes, Gascoigne.
Yes, there we go. Who wrote the most sensible article I've seen yet. Now, as a parent of elementary age child, I get a lot of materials from schools and PTA and fellow parents about protecting children from cyber traps and the various pitfalls, both legal and otherwise, that children will be subjected to once they begin to venture out onto the internets. Most of them are pretty alarmist. Most of them, I feel like I have to do my civic duty of jumping in and going, you haven't really thought this through entirely, and putting some alternate perspectives in front of the folks who are sending this stuff around that I'm seeing. But this particular group of tips from Adriana is really nice and sensible and reasoned, and goes through a lot of good advice for parents in navigating the online world with their kids. And she ends with some key steps, such as don't stop educating yourself, learn and understand the impact of technology on your child. And she gives all kinds of good details and tips, including get full access passwords and full friend status so that you know what's going on. So I really liked this as a resource. JD, you have a youngster as well. Do you have full access passwords and full friend status?
We haven't done that yet because all of his laptop action takes place right in front of us, every night. It's kind of pretty geeky. I'm there watching TV with my laptop, and so is my wife, and so is my kid. And he's at the age where he still doesn't even like girls, so I'm not worried about sexting just yet. But, I'm hoping somebody finds a way for me to be able to send him straight from middle school to college, and we can just skip over that whole high school thing.
Yes, that would be nice if we could invent that. Evan, how about you? Are you finding this coming up, or are your kids too young yet?
They're still in the leap pad stage, so that was the birthday presents. They both have leap pads, which do have an online component, but that's obvious. We know absolutely everything that goes on. So, these are great tips. I went to a great presentation by our local police department, a detective there whose job it is, to fight cybercrime, cyberbullying, and all that stuff. And that was just so enlightening to me. I went in thinking, what am I going to learn here? I know about all this stuff, but I was amazed at some of the nuances at which kids can be victimized in very creative ways by predators, and not only by predators, but kids are learning to do this stuff to each other now because they've been inculcated with all these things to watch out for from the bad people online. They've known now what to do to each other, which is just so ruthless. But there's one important point I want to make here, and that is there is a really big, as far as I can tell, undiscussed privacy issue. And I know I'll keep this brief, but there are a lot of companies, and this actually came up with a company that was working with the local police department, who after the cops scared the bejesus out of everybody, then they put on these vendors who say, here, we'll sell you this software to help you monitor what's going on. And so the hot areas in this are on the cloud-based services, all the social media platforms, and also the mobile space as well. So the way that all this monitoring happens, the concern is not so much anymore like what's actually on the kid's laptop. It's what's on their phone, what's on their account. And so all of the monitoring is done by virtue of creating essentially a cache copy on the provider's server somewhere. Right. So you have all of their friend requests, all their communications, everything. It's on a third-party server. Well, after I heard that presentation, I thought, okay, well, I'd really like to read the privacy policy because all this data now is in yet another location on somebody else's server. So what if the friendly detective that was talking to me just a little bit ago about all these bad things that happen, what if he sends a search warrant to that third-party server that with this company that they're in bed with, essentially, what are the privacy protections there? Yeah, I want to watch my kid, but I also don't want to just hand over evidence to the cops to come and arrest my kid. So I followed up with the company. I don't remember the name now. Maybe I'll write a blog post about it. I don't want to wrongfully indict some company here for privacy violations, but there is no meaningful privacy protection put in place by at least a couple of these companies out here who sell these services to parents. That will monitor your children's social media activities and also all of their other mobile activities, texting and stuff like that. There is no meaningful privacy protection from the cops sending search warrants or even private parties sending subpoenas to this stuff. So be careful of that kind of vector of your private information that's going out there in the name, for the sake of protecting your children. Don't be mindful of what rights you may be unwittingly giving up when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, that's a terrific tip in its own right. Laura, any thoughts on these issues before we move on to our resource?
No, I don't have children yet, but I may need tips for children protecting their parents from cyber traps, because my parents are now kind of foraying into the world of social media, and I've already had some interesting incidents. So
there you go. They're hearing from people in Nigeria.
My mom had a misstep setting up her Twitter account without me, and now she's getting all sorts of obscene direct messages. So
I'm the handle. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to make it any worse for her than it already is. So
put it in IRC.
I'll put it in the RSC.
Exactly. All right. Well, our resource of the week is a great infographic. I love infographics. And this one is about SOPA. And it's from a site called The Sociable, and it's called Behind SOPA, What It Means for Business and Innovation. So it's got that perspective to it, and it gives the background on the act, how it got to where it is today, how it will work, and the concerns that it raises. So if you need SOPA in a nutshell, this is a wonderful little capsule view of it. And it concludes with things that you can do if you're concerned about the act, a whole host of resources, including EFF and others who are helping people contact their representatives about the pending legislation that we've been discussing on the show. So thanks to The Sociable for making that so crystal clear and pretty. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up the last episode of This Week in Law for 2011. I really appreciate your guys joining us and wish you a wonderful and safe holiday. JD, always fun to talk to you.
Thanks a lot, Denise. I'm actually speaking at the United Nations next month, so I'll see if I can take off my shoe and bang the heel on the podium.
That's awesome. What are you talking about there?
Where I'm addressing about 200 NGOs to tell them about how to use social media for their causes.
Right. And tell us about the organization you're involved in that deals with that issue.
Well, I run socialmedia.biz, which is more for brands and law firms and those kinds of clients. My other firm is called SocialBrite, BRITE.org. And one resource that I'll point out is our Sharing Center, which is really cool. We have like hundreds, actually thousands of different articles, tutorials on how to use social media, Facebook, Twitter, but also monitoring and metrics, tricks, and how to create a social media policy. And we have an entire section on social media and the law and grassroots law on there, too. That might be helpful to some of your viewers.
Oh, wonderful. I'm going to go check that out. Thanks so much, JD. And tell your family hello and really enjoy the holidays. We hope to have you back on the show again soon.
Denise. You too.
Take care. And Laura, it's great meeting you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
So great to meet you too, finally.
Yes. Now you keep your parents safe out there.
I'm going to try.
So folks can find you at girlsintech.net.
Yeah,
and also
Laura,
at GIT Laura on Twitter. Anywhere else?
Laura at girlsintech.net if you're interested in learning more about us or participating or attending one of our functions. We're having a happy hour in San Francisco on December 20th at 111 Minna.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that and for joining us today. We hope you can come back.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you.
All right. Evan, it's been a fun year. Thank you so much for being here through thick and thin and on our concluding episode for 2011.
Wow, it's been a fast year, hasn't it?
It sure has.
But yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it has been a great year. It's amazing to think of all the stuff that's gone on this year, and putting it all in perspective. So it's such an honor to be here every week with you. I really enjoy it. So thank you very much for having me. And again, happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you too. Folks can find Evan over at Internet Cases on Twitter. And of course, he writes his excellent blog. We're going to look forward to that blog post you promised us at internetcases.com. About privacy issues on companies that are attempting to protect children. So that's just excellent. Now, we're going to be off on a little holiday break here, but that doesn't mean that I want to stop hearing from you. You know, we're still getting ready for the New Year's shows. So please do email me. I'm Denise at twit.tv. You can hit me up on Twitter. I'm at dhowell there. Over there on Google+, you can find me. TWiL has a page over on Google+, where we love to interact with listeners. Also, Facebook, we can go there too. We go there and do that. And of course, when we're not taking a break for the holidays, we are recording every Friday at 11 o'clock Pacific time or 1900 UTC. And we love to have you join us at live.twit.tv or take down TWiL however you like to consume it, whether in iTunes or on YouTube on a MediaFly-enabled device of some kind. We love that you're joining us through thick and thin yourselves. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the year 2011 for This Week in Law. Thanks so much to everyone. We'll see you next year. Take care.